So in light, you did talk about China and being more aggressive towards Taiwan. So what do you sort of make of this latest aggression in the last week? Is this a little bit of posturing before there's a change in government in the U.S., or is this just more of the same?
Mr. Chair, I'll start with a response. Again, China, sometimes they call it a revisionist power. It is trying to change the world order, whereby perhaps big powers can do to smaller powers what they want, which is why the Canadian Armed Forces wants to be more present and why we have Operation Horizon that puts a lot more Canadian capability in that region to demonstrate that we're contributing to security, and then that's not the right way to make changes.
So do you feel, given there's going to be a change in government in the U.S. in the new year, do you feel that that's going to change the relationship at all, or is this going to be more of the same?
Mr. Chair, from my perspective anyways, we have an excellent relationship with the U.S. I, of course, wouldn't speak to the political changes, but from a officials to officials perspective, we have an excellent relationship. We held what's called the Permanent Joint Board of Defense recently. It's the 242nd time that board was held. Excellent relationship, obviously, because that's the way the U.S. system works. Many of those officials will change out post-20 January, but we, I could throw over to my Director of Staff colleague here, have excellent defense-to-defense relations. So I don't have concerns from that perspective.
Do you feel that, as we look at what's going on over there, do you feel that North Korea is working with China as it comes to Taiwan? Is there, obviously there's lots of challenges when we deal with those types of countries, but do you feel like they're actively aiding China? What would your thoughts be in that?
Thank you, if I may. It's an excellent question. I would say, though, North Korea and Chinese cooperation is not centered on the issue of Taiwan. I think their cooperation is more related to maybe a nuclear program, fuel transfers, or to support the DPRK economy. And I think North Korea really, at the moment, is actually maybe early days, but focusing a lot of its relationship and its attention on working more closely with Russia. And that's what we're seeing in terms of deployment of North Korean personnel into Russia to fight in the war in Ukraine. And in exchange for that is maybe a technology transfer from Russia, but also other supplies. So just to answer your question, I'm not seeing the China-North Korea-Taiwan nexus.
Okay, that's great. You talked about Syria just a little bit, and the fact that a number of troops and individuals fled to Russia. So, how do you see that playing out in the next weeks and months in terms of as you look into your crystal ball?
I'm not sure my crystal ball is that that effective, sir. I do say that obviously we welcome the end of the Assad regime, a brutal, murderous regime that has been there in power for over 50 years. What we are wanting to ensure is obviously the destruction of chemical weapons and ensuring that there's an investigation and documenting evidence of the regime's crimes. It is obviously still early days. Things are still very fluid in Syria at the moment. And so our focus at the moment is encouraging a political and inclusive and political process under the UN framework to allow Syrians to have the dignity and the ability to run their country as they wish. There are some, from a security perspective, maybe some silver linings here in terms of, reduced access for Russia to the Mediterranean as a result of that, and also reducing Iran's influence in the region following that. But again, it is still very early days. It will take time to stabilize, and there may be still some very big hiccups along the way.
Mr. Chair, if I might just add some military as well. The HTS leader al-Jilani signaled a desire for normalized tone. So what we might see is working alongside other parties and other minority groups going forward. Israel has seized the opportunity to move into the Golan Heights in around observation posts to ensure that no Syrian threats enter Israel. And then additionally, what we've seen from Israel is targeting of the regime forces. So the Syrian Navy has been degraded. and 350 strikes have destroyed what we think is 70 to 80% of the former regime's capability. There specifically, we're talking about air and ground platforms, and we've also seen efforts from Israel and the West around securing the chemical and nerve stockpiles.
How much time do you have, Jim? Well, okay, so then maybe one final question, which I'm sure needs a lot more explanation maybe with the people picking up. But you talked about the North and the Arctic and the concern and the climate change and the fact to be more accessible. I mean, there's just so much that needs to go into how do we defend the Arctic. So, I mean, you know, this is less than a 60-second answer. What are some of the things that we need to start doing to be able to have a presence up there and start being able to defend the Arctic, so to speak? Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So first off, we do have a significant presence in the Arctic with our Rangers Alert in Ellesmere Island, 440 Squadron, and then Loyal Edmonton Regiment. But more importantly, we need to invest, as we have in the Northern Operational Support Hubs, which will provide responsiveness and agility to the North. Additionally, we're investing in expanding the capacity of the forward operating locations that allow us to surge more capability into the Arctic region to respond. In terms of domain awareness, Arctic over-the-horizon radar is in progress with our U.S. colleagues and integrated with NORAD headquarters out of Colorado Springs.
Okay, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave the answer there.
Witnesses. Early on, General Smith, you talked about working with our allies. Is that NATO, or does it move beyond NATO and include places like Israel?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So allies, absolutely. NATO, 31 others there as well. Indo-Pacific, Canada continues to make great strides under the Indo-Pacific strategy to build political relations and military connections. Israel remains a partner in the region. We do have a relationship with Israel militarily, although equally, as my colleague just said, under Op Impact, we're in Kuwait, we're in Lebanon, we're in Jordan, so we're very present. Sinai, I could go on. We are present in the region to produce stability, but Israel remains one partner.
Thank you. Speaking of Op Impact, how does the situation in Syria, as it's evolving, affect our involvement there?
Let me start, Mr. Chair, and then maybe others want to try to provide something else here. So we're monitoring the situation in Syria. Like, I think the world was surprised by what just happened. I think we all watched the news over the weekend and saw how quickly the regime fell. We are not in Syria. That being said, between forces we have in the surrounding area, we continue to track what's happening. And indeed, as was characterized, we have forces in the region. We are not making steps right now to put forces into Syria, nor are we being asked. Under Global Affairs Canada, we're watching what the situation is actually and to see how that progresses towards some type of stable long-term regime.
And Mr. Chair, I might just add that we continue to watch the threat situation very carefully and make prudent adjustments for the force protection of our individuals, including their posture, their location, their travel, and their security.
General Ritchie, you had mentioned the normalized tone from al-Jilani. Is this to be trusted?
Mr. Chair, maybe I'll start by saying it's early days, and we're just trying to assess the region, the dynamics, the credibility of the partners, to assess whether there's a say-do gap between what we hear and what we see, do so in partnership with other government departments and allies, and then try and find credible partners in the region with whom we can work militarily.
Is there any effect on our immediate effect on our reservist recruitment strategies or deployments on Op Impact as a result of the evolution in the Middle East?
Mr. Chair, not at this time. Our Operation Impact commitments remain firm, although, as to my earlier point, we have adjusted posture slightly within the missions for the security of the members, but we wait to see the developments in the region and how the Canadian Armed Forces might respond.
You had mentioned UNIFIL earlier. What's our commitment to UNIFIL?
Our commitment to UNIFIL is 2 individuals, and we also have 2 individuals that are under the United Nation Disarmament Observation Group UNDOF. One was in Damascus that has moved to Camp Farwar, and the other one is in the Golan Heights right now between Israel and Syria at Observation Post 51.
Okay. So with the changes in Syria, how do we view the strength of their military after the bombardments that we've seen from Israel in the last days?
Mr. Chair, our initial assessment is it's largely evaporated. And as my colleague characterized, there's been heavy bombardment by Israel and other forces to dismantle extensive parts of the Syrian regime forces. But we continue to monitor the new regime, what they've done, which so far has seemed to be quite moderate. Very early days. This happened over the last weekend.
And Mr. Chair, if I just might add two broader implications. One is the Syrian development is going to challenge LH in terms of Iran pushing supplies, equipment, technology into Lebanese Hezbollah in the Lebanon area. And the other is we're watching Russia carefully. They had a base in Latakia. They had maritime vessels in Tartus. The maritime vessels have moved to sea. But we're watching their posture to see how they may adapt long term.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was my next question about the Russian naval assets. So we understand then that Iran's influence has been weakened by the developments in Syria.
Mr. Chair, maybe I'll start and then let my colleagues jump in. So we've seen Iranian influence weakened on a few fronts. The first is in Gaza with Hamas. The second is to the north of Israel in Lebanon with Lebanese Hezbollah. And then the third now is Syria to their west, all of which are rolling back what could be layered support that upon which the Iranian defense construct rests.
Dan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses and thank General Smith and General Ritchie for your service to Canada, and Mr. Laporte for always bringing your expertise. You mentioned that there is probably a technology transfer happening between Russia and North Korea. What technology transfer do we think that is beyond enriched uranium?
Mr. Chair, I'll start. Maybe some of my colleagues want to help. I don't know anything about enriched uranium transfers from Russia to the DPRK. North Korea, have had a nuclear program for decades, so they've had some. But we're looking at like maybe delivery systems, missiles, and other capabilities like that. Russia is ahead of the DPRK, and they may be transferring those type of technologies.
What about submarines?
Mr. Chair, what I am tracking is missiles, perhaps air defense interceptors, fuel, money. I am personally not aware of submarines.
Okay.
There may be some discussion around fighter aircraft, but we have nothing conclusive.
Okay. Now, North Korea already committed 12,000 troops plus munitions and rocket launch systems to Russia for the war in Ukraine. There's rumors that those numbers of 12,000 may be increased. Any intel to suggest that it is going up beyond the 12,000 troops?
Mr. Chair, I have no conclusive information on that. We continue to actively watch that in partnership with allies. It's difficult to see when North Korean troops may enter the east side of Ukraine. It's much easier as they're moving towards the front to discern how they're getting equipped with clothing, weapons, equipment, and then moving and integrating. But at this point, only 12,000.
Okay. We talked about Operation Impact in the region. We know that the Ring of Fire around Israel has been virtually destroyed now, especially with the fall of Hezbollah, Hamas, and Syria under the Assad regime. How is that going to change the posture of Iran in Iraq using Quds Force, the IRGC, and the Sunni or the Shia militia units that they have that they're backing in Iraq, and how does that potentially impact Canadian troops that are serving alongside our allies?
Mr. Chair, first of all, I wouldn't characterize a fall of either Hezbollah or Hamas. They've both been severely damaged by Israel, as indeed Israel has damaged. It's not my facts, but has been disclosed as heavily damaged the air defense system of Iran itself. Iraq remains having Iranian-aligned militia groups, and indeed we have Canadians under NMI, NATO Mission Iraq, inside in Baghdad. We're paying very close attention to their force protection, but more importantly, there is going to be a transfer of responsibilities from Operation Inherent Resolve, the U.S. mission, to NMI. We could see that being delayed potentially, but for now, that is they're all very carefully watching the force protection situation.
So when we're looking at the Iran relationship with Russia and their ability to use Syed kamikaze drones and other rockets and munitions supplied by Iran, with the degradations that happened because of the war in Gaza and Lebanon, and do we see their ability to supply Russia going forward depleted as well?
Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. So Moscow is indeed providing fighter aircraft, air defense, as well as space technology. And then Tehran is providing Russia with support for the war in Ukraine. Is our understanding of that relationship?
Okay. And just in my last minute here, Mr. Chair, I just want to move the motion that I tabled last week, that the committee hold 3 meetings in relation to the defense components of the Arctic foreign policy announced on December 6, 2024, within 14 days of the adoption of this motion, and invite the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of National Defense, and the Minister of Northern Affairs to appear separately for no less than 2 hours each with the departmental officials.